So I didn't say I want to get into that. I was just making observations in line with the other
man,
topic.
you hear two things in Texas. I can tell you right now, man, our education system is wholeheartedly run by a bunch of freaking progressives, man, from hell. So,
all right, I guess
I've been fighting that shit for a long time. Actually, my local schools here are pretty damn good, though. My son's. I read over everything with my son and do homework with him. And they've been really good. I'll tell you right now, if I'd have seen something like this 9/11 question that they freaking put on the homework right there, I would have been on the news and all kinds of shit. It would have been on, because that would have blown my top off right there. But
I don't think the question's as bad as people are making out to be, but the correct answer is kind of all of the above and none of the above.
I mean, it should be all of the above.
Yeah.
That's what it should be, really. But we know what that's targeting. Of course, the whole purpose of war is because someone's done something to piss another person off. That's called the force of wills, for crying out loud.
Well, but that is the answer they want.
But anyway, dude. Oh, and your little your C-scope stuff. I mean, that's nothing new, dude. We've got part of that organization is very progressive, but Texas has had this thing, and even Bush did this shit. He liked this shit, with these fucking tests. I did that when I was a kid. It was called TOS. Now it's STAR, and now.
Is it now a STAR? I thought it was TAS now or whatever.
No, TAS was old. Now it's STAR. My son's going to take a STAR test. It's this week. I hate that too, because a lot of teachers, it's right, you lose analytical thought because you teach the kids to pass a test, essentially. Now, the argument, well, we just make the test very comprehensive. No, you don't. And part of the process of education is not always cut and dry. Part of understanding, like when they were talking about the removing algebra, in part, I agree that not everything that we have as comprehensive on algebra should be taught. I'll give an example of when I was in college. There was a great professor that everybody wanted to get into his class. And he was from South Africa, brilliant mathematician. This guy, and he literally would tell you, the textbook that you just bought for this class, go return it. And he would. But this man knew how to break down stuff. I used a lot of his stuff in my programming. Just analytical thought and shorter ways of doing it. I mean, the dude knew what the hell he was talking about. And if you were a person who did really shitty in algebra, I guarantee you'd probably do very well in this class. And the way he would explain it. And I know this article is talking about quadratics and derivatives. That's fine. Quadratics and deriving it is a very good exercise in analytical process. But I think that there's other ways, not necessarily without giving all the information and saying, well, if you dismiss a certain part of algebra, oh my God, it's the end of the world. No, I don't. I want to know what they dismissed. But I will agree. So I'll agree and disagree with that statement, saying, yes, I hate educating to pass tests. At the same time, I'm not as worried. What was removed? I need more information about it. Well, but definitely side with the teachers and say, we need to get off of this test milestone type shit. Although, an argument is, well, how well are students doing?
I will ask you point blank. At some point, the way you find out what's in a kid's head is a test.
Yeah.
They got to take one at some point. It's like.
It's true, but you have to understand Texas. I mean, they get all bent out of shape over this shit. Let me tell you. They get all bent out of shape over this stuff. Let me tell you. It's, my son will come here and he'll have the STAR test is in 3 weeks. And blah, blah, oh my God. It's like, okay, take a break.
I bet that's everywhere in the country, though. Every state, county, and or district has their equivalent of the test. We have the test. It's X days to the test.
I have people that comment living in other states that I'd like to know. I mean, is there an equivalent to this star and toss test crap?
There has been a bit. As a kid, I went to school in 12 different states. And I will tell you point blank, in all 12 of them, there was some equivalent. So, it isn't just your local backyard, it's just the name's different.
Yeah, but they seem so obsessed over it, I'm telling you, man. They seem very obsessed.
And they get obsessed the closer they get to it, you know, which in and of itself, in my opinion...
Like in 2 days. Oh, okay.
And in my opinion, that actually teaches the wrong mentality. Because, you know, it's the same mentality people do in society in general. It's like, oh, well, my taxes are due April 15th. Oh, that's months off. My taxes are due on April 15th. Oh, that's weeks off. It's April 12th and I haven't got my taxes! It's just, you know, if you prepared and keep all your things the whole time, and your point is, stressing over it the few weeks before isn't going to change what's in anyone's heads.
Woo, man, but anyway, alright, so, there was a viewer of ours.
Okay, I know the one you're going into. I made a reply to that. I have no idea where your 2 cents on that particular issue is.
No, I didn't see your reply. I just saw the guys, or girls, I don't know who it's guy or girl, whatever, but they watch our videos.
Yeah, which one are you referring to? The one that didn't like my comparison of shelter and...
they made you, I think they said they got sick from it, it must be a right. And that's where I wanted to chime in on the right portion of it, and that there's this very specific reason, even way back when, that a right to shelter is not necessarily, actually, what I don't even think in the UK, and they don't even have a constitution, and in France has had quite a few, that a right necessarily. Now you can derive and say, well, we have welfare programs and all this other stuff, but a shelter, quite simply, is not an individual. In other words, the definition of our rights are described as individuals, and shelters are non-contextual to that. And that's the reason why someone who receives housing is received through different apparatus. Now, if they're that's why we don't even enumerate it as a right. It's not even necessary, number one.
Well, the argument you're going against there is like, I'm just going to read exactly the quote we're talking about. It sickens me having to read your explanation of shelter versus housing. For human beings to rise above this neanderthalic, capitalist, self-centered system, we must consider housing as a human right.
Yeah, that's the one.
I understand point blank the spirit and sentiment and compassion with which that statement was made, and here's the thing. I equate, and I'm gonna piss this person off by saying this, and I kind of did it in text, but I haven't done it now. I equate stances like this to the legal question: have you stopped hitting your wife yet? Because it's the double standard. So if I stand against this position, as it were, it infers, even though I didn't say it, that I don't want people to have housing. No, I would love to live in a world where food, medicine, housing, and many other basic luxuries, which are essential to a good quality of life and enduring generational prosperity, are in such abundance and so marginalized that there truly is enough for everybody. I'd love to live in that world.
Utilize capitalism to...
Well, and there's multiple models to go about it. However, a stroke of a pen dictating that it is a right does not magically eliminate the scarcity.
Right. Well, what I was trying to get at is the reason because they use human right there, and see, let's be clear. There's no countries or countries and sovereignty within their own laws, and that's why I use the context of our own Constitution for enumerating rights, and then what other parliaments and governments use to address the issue, and why it's really just non-contextual and a contradiction to approach that that statement in such a way. The thing of it is that they used also the word capitalism, which was raised my antenna, and that you said there's different models, not necessarily. The most efficient model that we have economically is capitalism, is the most humane. Oh, did I say that? Yes, capitalism is the most humane. That is why I believe wholeheartedly in capitalism, because no matter what you would like to say on paper or argue that, well, this form of government really hasn't had enough chance in human history, a lot of what the United States is not necessarily capitalism. We have corporations in league with government, which to me is not really capitalism at all. It's abuse. It's abuse of power, and it shouldn't. The connection between company and government shouldn't be made in that context. But if we were to truly have competition, where we allow free and equal opportunity, then what we do achieve, which happens in the majority of the American market, is a surplus and extremely cheap prices, and that's how we help poor people. We help poor people, and I constantly beat my drum on this by making things cheaper, not making things more expensive. Other models, quite frankly, are going to say, let's subsidize or draw money from here or do whatever, and that will simply raise the bar of the price because you have a guaranteed floor. And once you have a guaranteed floor, the only direction from there is up, as with most government programs that I can cite almost all of them are a byproduct of that, because we use baseline budgeting, number one, which is a problem, and we do rate tests. Essentially that's how we get CPI and all this other stuff. And quite frankly, you have to understand what you're physically seeing and stop misnaming things like, oh, well, that's just greedy or that's just capitalist and stuff. Why is it that Democrats have all these freaking alliances? If they're so for the people, they have, I would say, probably equal to or more alliances with businesses as Republicans, right? And how many companies has the Obama administration pretty much lifted? Which a lot of them were green companies. Others, there were some other manufacturing companies. A lot of them are now defunct that were used tax dollars for, which is a complete alliance between a government and companies. Which, guess what that does? That creates a false that actually creates a false entry into the market, a false existence in the market, creates a false price for buying for the entire supply chain involved with that specific market, and causes price distortion. And once we have price distortion, we can't reach the efficient levels of bringing prices down. The whole thing where people argue about healthcare is like, well, the costs are too high, right? And making everybody have insurance is not going to reduce the cost. Everybody having insurance is just going to increase, just like your little article there. It guarantees a floor. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing to do is say, well, let's make sure everybody has insurance. No. How do we get poor people health care? You got to actually address what's making healthcare expensive.
Well, okay. Setting aside that philosophical argument, which I know is also an economic one, if you really want to go into Obamacare, here's the shit that makes me sick about the affordable.
I digress until we fully answer the person's question about.
Okay.
I don't find actually anything neanderthal about capitalism when it is allowed to compete. And even if someone is, let's say, greedy, and they're not selling at preferred prices, there's always that company. It's happened just about in
Actually, I can sum up the effect of greed in a pure capitalistic system in one sentence. Anybody who has any experience trading on either the Forex market or any stock market that is as close to a pure capitalistic supply and demand buy-sell system as you can get of the commodities, goods, or things being exchanged on those markets, where it's literally the price is dictated by the trade. Watch. Somebody who is greedy, just sit back and watch. You will watch them give back every single penny they ever made and lose more.
Exactly. Part of the banking problem we just had, where the banks took advantage of the bullshit the government created and started to get greedy and trying to wash those funds, on the subprime market and interlock. And we discussed this on the other show. Is they weren't allowed to be punished. Capitalism would let those people be punished. Now, just because the money disappears for something doesn't mean the house disappears. Those people that were living in those homes, their money, the money that may be behind that home is gone, but they're still there in their house. And that house would have to be revalued and all kinds of other things that would go on, but I guarantee you, the house doesn't go poof and they don't have to get out. A lot of those entities should have been punished that got off. That's one of the biggest things that I got pissed off about, the too big to fail. If we're really going to have a capitalist market, stop being freaking hypocrites about it. You know what I'm saying? It is my problem. But to further address his issue, I don't find anything Neanderthal, and I'd like to know what is so Neanderthal and what other systems would the viewer propose? Because I've always said, I'm all for like nanotechnologies and things like that we see that are futuristic, like take Star Trek for example, where what do those technologies do? They eliminate the need for economics because you can take substance and have constant surplus everywhere. And you know what? I'm all for throwing gobs of money at technologies that can.
Well, technically, if we can straighten out the rights management and distribution of patterns, we are almost in Gene Roddenberry's replicator universe because they have these things called 3D printers that can make clothes, cups, shoes.
One is create surplus. We have a constant surplus or sufficient demand is met. Therefore, we don't even need economics at all for distribution. We don't need any. I'll be happy. We can just throw all of the economic books in the fire, and we're done with it.
Okay, but that goes back to the sentence I made a minute ago, which is you can legislate it as a right. You can have that point of view. The only way you achieve that is by, as you're stating, eliminating the scarcity. There has to be enough for everybody. Until you solve that underlying problem, you can say whatever you want.
Right. We know there's scarcity, but how do we efficiently distribute in the most humane way? And that is the argument of economics. The problem is when I hear words like Neanderthal, that's a more philosophical point of view usually. And so I would love a philosophical point of view to have the pragmatic economic practice and execution.
Well, but I would make the argument that why I'm sure this person will disagree, and we're leaving your name out of this because we're not picking on you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay. But I would make the argument that they call it Neanderthalic, Neanderthal, but capitalist and self-centered system. Inherently, a true capitalist is not self-centered.
Oh, we want as many consumers and suppliers as possible.
Yeah, it's like the exact opposite of self-centered because we understand we prosper most on the system with which we have symbiosis prospering.
The less players and the more control, which equals self-centered, the worse.
Yeah. It's like that. Well, I will have all the money. That's the self-centered argument. Well, as soon as I have all the money, it's worthless.
A capitalist doesn't strive to get all the money because that's a static variable.
Exactly. But it's.
But I'm gonna tell you, any centrally planned government loves static variables because it's a bitch when you control everything and variables change too rapidly for you to handle, that's why them freaking governments love static shit.
Well, but see, some of this, and believe me, I understand this mentality, because when you say capitalist, here's what the common man thinks. That rich-ass billionaire in the house on the hill that has way more than they fucking need, and they're greedy, and they're a miser, and they don't help anybody, and they hurt this whole damn town, and they put my grandpa out of work, and it's not... That's what they think of when they think of capitalism.
Yeah.
That is not a capitalist. A capitalist is that person who lives in a shack and builds themselves up to the same equal footing as that asshole over there, but never stops.
Right, you can accumulate wealth and become rich. Now, some of the instances, like where their grandfather's out of work, happens with comparative advantage. But to keep the grandfather working would be at the expense of, say, 20 others not being, they're not able to enter the market and so on and so forth.
I bet I've had that argument with about a dozen people in the last 2 years, which is the whole argument of it is not morally wrong to it sounds repugnant, but to come in and especially in this economy and everything else, to honestly make the argument that firing somebody may be for the greater good, but there are times where it's what keeps the company alive so that everybody else has their job.
Yeah, and talk about that. What about me? What about my grandfather? What about this? And isn't that the self-centered argument?
Well, and I'm putting words in their mouth here because they didn't actually say that.
But that's usually a more progressive viewpoint of what about mine? And it's like in America, the greatest point of it is like only in this country do you have like minorities eating each other up for entitlements, and they will go and get bloody and all kinds of politically.
Well, this is also, and
you
know what? I can do you one better.
To the point to say like, well, you're not black, well, you're not Latino, you're not Asian enough, you're not this enough, and, because me, I'm the one. I mean, where are the self-centered arguments? What are really the self-centered arguments? The more progressive arguments.
Bet I can do you one better if you want to have the whole argument on the capitalistic thing. We are probably, in terms of regulation, the United States is probably one of the countries that creates the most the most barriers to low entry into markets and other things, because we want to treat people, we want to create all these little rules and signs that are different. The reality is, in a lot of cases, if I want to really experience pure capitalism, step one, leave the U.S. At least on paper, It's funny, but that's where we've put it,
And here's something else. Of the top 10 richest senators.
Not richest people, richest senators. We need to stress that.
Richest. No, I guess. Wait a minute. Where's this richest members of Congress? Damn, I thought it was richest senators. Let's see. Okay, richest members of Congress.
Well, Congress is a lot more people.
Yeah. Well. Okay. So of the top 10, 7 are Democrat, and 3 are Republican.
Now, I have another question for you. You may not have the statistic in front of you, but I encourage you to look it up, and I encourage our people too. What percentage of their wealth was created after they entered office versus before they entered office?
I have no idea. Yeah.
That's a scary statistic in a lot of cases.
Oh, but the Democrats are for the people and therefore poor and blah, blah, blah. Freaking horseshit, bullshit stuff, man.
I am going to say one thing. I don't think the individual who's made the comments cared one thing about Republican or Democrat.
I know.
And the reality is...
I have a friend that applied from another country.
Well, no, and here, I'm going to tell you point blank. That mentality right there is the fundamental problem, because we get sidetracked a lot, particularly in the U.S., about this. Oh, which party is it? What's the thing? Which heartstring are they pulling on? Yada yada. Like none of that should matter, at all. And like in the debate of which is what the core back and forth on this particular topic is, housing right, not right. None of that should matter. It should purely come down to a logistics thing, and does housing being a right help or hurt more people?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But which one is better for?
Oh no, I love picking on things how our progressive United States are just so for the people. That'd be crazy.
Well, I could say the same thing for the other side of the aisle in a different way.
No, but see, no one's. That's not the claim. I'm saying the argument is how we're so for the people. Right? Sure you will. I'm talking about based on the claim.
As long as you want to break my ability to take care of myself, I have a hard time believing you have my best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a different matter.
But yeah, so man, we go around in a circle. But addressing that right, the best way without eliminating scarcity is to try to make it everything from logistics, everything as cheap as possible, and then from there, from whatever apparatus we have for helping the less fortunate through whatever welfare program. And I always say, lowering the price of goods is a tax cut in and itself. Now,
well, okay, but that's not always the best way to go about solving a problem. And like housing in particular, I'll give you the perfect example. We have these devices with that. Realistically, we are pretty much technologically at the point where I can print you a house. I can print you a
yeah, but that's the technology's there. That's not the market to price ratio.
No, it isn't. But the technology. But if we get that to market to price ratio, I'm going to tell you what the very first thing is going to happen the moment that technology hits the market in large. Anybody who is responsible for hammering the stick framework, or basically, you will put a bunch of people out of work the day you implement that technology. Good news. Housing prices just went down 80%, which makes everybody's house worth less because they cost less to make, cost less to buy. Oh, there goes all these people's equity. By the way, they just lost their job, and I'm just telling you, it has a ripple out effect. So
that wouldn't happen overnight. Number one, and we already have markets where there's what we call product discrimination. That's a product discrimination event, and actually, you already have different prices of houses and things. But that actually you would put people out because normal houses would still be demanded, and other people there would be.
Yes. I'm for the American-made house.
All kinds of, just like in any other market, the product discrimination would be rampant, and then over time, one begins to win and becomes the mainstay, and then values are re-leveled and assessed. So I'm not as worried about that aspect of it.
So the other people's money argument of the best damn buggy whip.
Yeah, but here's my point: is that okay? So we lower the price of things. Will we now be taxed less because now that things cost less? Now my tax dollars are far more efficient. Instead of, in other words, are we going to get a return now because we've made things much more?
No, we'll just find something new to spend that money on so we owe more.
Man. I hope we answered the question. I just don't find anything neanderthal in the way we try to address, economic scarcity and distribution. It'd be nice to give everybody an equal house, but the way you do that, like I said, hey, I'll be the first one. Economics has my degree to throw all the economics books out once you've made those replicators and shit. Remove scarcity. I'm all for that. But in the meantime, it is an oxymoron to debate philosophy with economics.
Well, inherently we have a finite universe, so you can't eliminate scarcity, but you can create such abundance that scarcity...
Yeah, you marginalize it.
Yeah.
That's sort of
Okay.